Hello and welcome to the special transmission regarding the annual budget for the next fiscal year 2024 and 25. Federal Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb has formally presented this particular budget with a total outlay of 18.877 trillion rupees, and the growth is expected to be at 3.6% for the next fiscal year. A number of very important stats I would like to share from this important speech made in the National Assembly today by Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb. Now, as I have already mentioned, the growth is expected to remain around 3.6%. The inflation is expected at 12%. Also, when we talk about the budget deficit, the finance minister said it is going to be around 6.9% of the GDP, and there is going to be primary surplus of 1% of the GDP. As far as the tax collection is concerned by the Federal Board of Revenue, it is estimated to be around 12,970 rupees with 38% increase in this particular head this time around as compared to the previous year. Now, when we talk about the non-revenue target, it is going to be 3,587 billion rupees this time around, and also the federal expenditure is estimated at around 18,877 billion rupees. Out of this particular amount, 9,775 billion rupees will be spent on the interest payments. Lots of other important aspects of this particular budget speech to be discussed in today's special show. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Khalid Waleed. He's an economist associated with the Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Dr. Waleed, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are pleased to have been joined by Musharraf Zaur. He's our correspondent. He's been there at the National Assembly since the start of the day, and he had been following as far as the Pakistan Economic Survey that was presented yesterday and today, all the proceedings in the National Assembly regarding presentation of this budget for the next fiscal year. Musharraf, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us. Also on Skype, we are honored to be joined by Mr. Shikoh Atif. He's an economist. Mr. Atif, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. We really appreciate that. I will straight away come to you, Musharraf. Let's talk about the salient features of this particular budget. Would you like to share what are those salient features where the government this time around has focused specifically on?
Very well, Tehami, as you have already mentioned various figurative things, with the viewers. But I would specifically talk about the focus of the government. Primarily, the budget speech, which was delivered by Finance Minister Mohammad Aurangzeb today, focused on two major things. One was structural reforms, and second, to decrease government's intervention in various sectors, and to liberalize the economy, and also specifically mentioned privatization of different state-owned enterprises. So these were the focuses. Also, apart from that, he also talked about in length about increasing tax net, which is very important, and he emphasized on that because the previous day, once he was holding pre-budget conference, he stated that government will be unable to provide those quick facilities which people expect from the from any sitting government when there is very small tax net, and people who are out of this net, they will be taxed in the budget. And according to the expectations, he announced taxation for various sectors, also penalties for those non-filers who are not paying taxes. And these were the most important
so these were the salient
budget.
features. As far as you have mentioned about the way the government is focusing in order to expand that very tax base, a very well thought out and a comprehensive policy this time around has been shared during this particular budget speech by the finance minister. Also, I'll come back to you to have your detailed findings regarding this particular policy, or what the government has been able to share, and how the government plans to go about it in order to expand that particular tax base. Now, Dr. Khalid Waleed, what according to you are the salient features of this particular budget? Now, we have talked about the taxation. I'll come to you about the taxation policy that has been introduced by the government this time around in order to expand the tax base. Also, the public sector development projects, the kind of increase that has been given in that particular head also. I'll be taking your view. Overall, how do you see this particular budget by the government?
My takeaways would be the homegrown agenda, the stabilized economy, inclusive and sustainable growth, focus on market-determined economy, not the government-determined economy. Secondly, pension reforms, sustainability of debts, and thirdly, how we can sort of manage these expenditures, public expenditures from the government through right sizing, through privatization, through measures like procurement sort of policies and other sort of things. This is a balanced sort of budget to me, focused on stabilization, also on growth as well. In terms of PSDP, Public Sector Development Program, it has increased to about 1.5 trillion rupees. That would be a good thing. Second thing that is most important is that government is focused on course correction in terms of expenditures that they do, and providing targeted subsidies, not the blanket subsidies. Although there have been subsidies allocated for electricity and gas sector, but still the government's focus would be on those targeted subsidies. Third thing that I would take from this budget is unprecedented allocation for Benazir income support program. That would be very helpful for the poor section in terms of the structural reforms that have been that would be done under EFF, so that would provide some sort of fiscal cushion and relief to those sector. Fourth is that there is talk of climate resilience and initiatives such as providing efficient fans and EV industry with exemption. So that would be some sort of positive environmental aspects as well. So this is a balanced budget catering in terms of social protection, in terms of energy related reforms, in terms of right sizing, rationalizing targeted subsidies, as well as the climate change. So in that regard, this is the way forward. Pakistan needs to pursue this course correction sort of regime so that we have this long-term and integrated sort of program.
Let me proceed towards Mr. Shikoh Atif. Mr. Shikoh Atif, before the presentation of this particular budget for the next fiscal year, what were your expectations? And after listening to this particular budget speech by the Federal Finance Minister, what is your understanding? Where do you see Pakistan heading as far as the economic front for the next fiscal year is concerned?
So the focus in this budget is the 3.6% growth that they are targeting. They expect the government sector expenditure, the PSDP 1.5 trillion rupees, to be the catalyst for that. That is where they see the growth. So the government would spend the money, and that would be the catalyst for growth of the country. This is the major headline of this budget that I see as they presented it. Now, this is a tremendous increase over the 9.4 trillion that was set aside in the previous year. However, only half of that was actually spent on development projects within the country. So 4.5 trillion was spent even though the margin was 9.3 trillion. So for them, rest of the money was not spent because of not being able to allocate funds to various projects because of fear of NAB. Now, this time around, they came out with 1.5 trillion. Now, the big challenge for the government is that money actually going to be spent? And if it is spent, a lot of money has been allocated to MPAs, MNAs, for their areas to spend there. Now, if that is spent, the finance minister talked a lot about structural issues in Karachi. He talked a lot about the structural issues across the country, which is a wonderful thing. I know you're going to come back to the taxation area a little bit later on, but I just want to touch a
To
little
that
bit
particular
on.
area. Mr. Shikoh Atif, I seek your pardon for the interjection over here. As you already started your take from the PSDP, it's 101% bigger than the last year's revised volume. Now, the major challenge that you have just mentioned in your take is that how this particular budget that is allocated is going to be spent. Now, as far as this particular 83 of the resources allocated for this particular huge amount is going to be for the ongoing projects, and only 17% of the resources for the new projects. So the segregation in this percentage, is it going to affect that the point that you've already mentioned that will ensure that how basically this amount is going to be it is going to be implemented the way the government intends to?
You make an excellent point. The one major issue with Pakistan is we start out projects, we don't complete them, the cost goes up the next year, the next government comes in, it shelves the previous projects. So this time around, with SIFC and NEC coming out with this focus, the major focus is on completing the projects that are in the offing already rather than to start new projects. So it's a right balance, it's a right approach to first complete the pending projects that are already on the go. Some people have criticized
new allocations. So the question of new allocations is not there when 87% of this particular amount is going to be spent on the ongoing projects. Am I correct?
I don't think 87%, but I think about 45 to 50% is going to be spent on the previous projects, and 50% is going to be spent on being a catalyst for new growth and new areas. But I have to double check on that number.
It's 83%. 83%. I'll take this very point to Dr. Khalid Waleed. Dr. Waleed, now this particular segregation into 83% of the resources, the point which has been raised already, it all depends on how it's going to be a challenge for the authorities where it is allocated. So the question of allocation doesn't seem to be in operation as far as this segregation 83% towards those projects which are already ongoing. What's your understanding?
Well, if you remember in last budget, the PSDP was about 967 billion rupees, and that was those projects were halted by SIFC and by the caretaker government in order to avoid the economic turmoil and introduce economic stability. Now this government, they sort of reinitiated those projects, and now that's why the focus is on about 87% of the projects, 83% of the projects that are the projects that have been ongoing. In that PSDP, about 253 billion is for energy sector, about 289 billion for transportation, 206 for water resources, and those water resources, in those water resources, these are the projects initiated in previous years, particularly the Mohammed Dam and the Amir Bhasha Dam. So these are the previous projects that has been reinitiated, and I would agree with the previous speaker that this is the right kind of approach. We need to sort of finish the ongoing project first and then start the new projects, so that we introduce efficiency, we introduce cost cutting measures, and we sort of introduce this efficiency sort of regime in public sector development program, because this is the infrastructure that Pakistan direly needed, and Pakistan's economy is sort of reliant on this infrastructure. So I would say that completing the previous projects, that would be a good measure for
your point
Pakistan's
is well
economy.
taken. Musharraf, going back to that very important place where the government actually intends to expand the revenue from, right? So 38% increase as per the speech made by the finance minister. The taxation, the area of taxation, right? So as far as I was hearing that particular speech, there were four key heads to that policy, and later on there is further explanation to how this is going to be implemented. So the digitization to bring in the undocumented sector into the tax net, also creating a huge difference between who is a filer and who is a non-filer. So could you come up with the details of what that particular head under the taxation policy presented by the government contains?
Well, rightly mentioned, Tehami, that government has also taken punitive measures in taxation for those who are non-filers, and also they have taxed the immovable properties like capital gains tax. For filers it is 15%, and for non-filers it is 45%. Likewise, if we see capital gains tax on securities, the same slabs have been kept for the filers and non-filers. Filers will have to will be taxed 15%, while non-filers will have 45. They will have to pay 45% tax. Likewise, on immovable properties, withholding tax, the filers will have to pay taxes 3% tax, while non-filers will have to pay double 6% tax on the immovable properties. Like if we see a few other things on textile and leather industry, we see that they are called tier 1 retailers. The government has proposed 15% to increase tax from 50% to 18% on these industries. Likewise, on mobile phones, the standard rate has been proposed 18%. We also see in this in these budget proposals that government has extended tax income tax exemption for FATA, erstwhile FATA regions. That is also
the
very
newly merged
important.
districts?
Yes, newly merged districts of federally administered, erstwhile federally administered tribal areas. So that is also an important move that has been announced by the finance minister. Also, we see that the government have also decided to tax retailers specifically. As we see ahead of this tax document preparation process, there were several meetings with retailers and from the representatives of different industries, different sectors, who met with finance minister Mohammad Aurangzeb, and these meetings certainly would have given enough time government to consult all the relevant stakeholders to tax these particular sectors which we are talking about today.
Musharraf, so thank you very much for joining us in the studio. After all days hard work, you've been covering the proceedings of the National Assembly as far as the presentation of this fiscal year 2024-25 budget is concerned. Yesterday you were following the presentation of Pakistan Economic Survey. Thank you very much for joining in the studio. Mr. Shikoh Atif, now taxation. Now, as far as the target that has been set by the federal government, when we specifically talk about the Federal Board of Revenue Tax Collection, it happens to be 12,970 Pakistani rupees now, billion rupees. It is 38% more than the current fiscal year. It's a considerable jump when we consider setting such an ambitious target. What do you think of it, firstly? And what measures do you think the government will have to put in order to achieve this particular target of 38% increase?
So one thing which has been in the background of this budget formulation has been the sustained pressure from IMF for the ongoing negotiations which are supposed to conclude next month. So they were actually expecting a figure even a little bit beyond the 12.9 that you kindly mentioned. This is a substantial increase. Some of the moves that the government has made and suggested areas for taxation are very smart indeed, like the removal of subsidies and bringing taxation back onto the electric vehicles. People were paying $50,000 to bring in a car and then getting a subsidy that we don't have to pay taxes on it to Pakistan. So some of the ideas are absolutely really great. The retailers, the trick is in the implementation. I hope they are able to implement the POS systems that would bring the retailers back into the offing. Uh, the the one area which no one talks about, people talk about agriculture, which was they paid. First of all, the brilliant thing with this past year was the agricultural growth was what sustained us as a country. So the agricultural growth was a major part of the 2.4% growth rate achieved last year. But the sad thing was industry. And that's what I want to talk to you about for a second, about the taxation as well. There are 30 lakh registered industrial electric connections in the country. Only 1 lakh out of those pay any taxes. Even though the growth was in industry was 0.1% last year, but what about the other 29 lakh electric connections to industry who don't pay any taxes? And the government has not, I've not seen anything in the government that we will talk to the electric companies, we will get the information of all of these other subscribers and tax them. So there has been weak implementation area there that I see.
What's the importance of digitization as far as increasing this particular revenue from the undocumented areas is concerned?
You know, the correspondent very aptly was sharing some of the penalties that have been enforced on what the so-called non-filers. They are effective. The digitalization is great, but that's the reason why people don't even come into the system, that once we become a part of the system, then we will be taxed through our noses. So digitalization, absolutely, very, very important, especially with the advent of AI. I was a part of the budget making process in Canada for the Bank of Canada in 2015. Even at that time, we were using AI to help us out. You mentioned digitalization, absolutely. But something that you mentioned a little bit earlier on was way more important than that. The finance minister bringing in and having a communication and getting buy-in from the retail sector. So if there is better communication between these sectors, that is a way better remedy than any other that I can think of. But up point that you made.
Increasing the penalty for the non-filers. So how bigger and a significant impact it is going to have in bringing all those people into the tax net?
Yes. So penalties are 2 lakhs. Penalties are very small for non-filers. In Canada and all across the developed world, the penalties are so severe that no one even dare not pay taxes. In Pakistan, it's just a slap on the wrist. It's okay if you, this term non-filer is unthought of in progressive developed economies. So you mentioned penalties, they are very, very lax in Pakistan. Even, you know, when your correspondent was going through a run through of the penalties, they are so lax. They're just a slap on the hand. They should be
45% on non-filers under different slabs. I mean, do you still consider it just a tap on the wrist, a simple slab on the wrist of 45%?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there are areas where, I mean, one good thing that they've done is they've removed one slab from the higher paying, higher earning salaried people. Good. They have started taxing people who get more than 100,000 rupees, 1 lakh rupees in pensions. Good. But I really think here you go to jail if you don't pay taxes.
Okay, so your point is well taken. Mr. Shikoh Atif, one last point I want to understand what your expectation when the government sets 38% increase in the total revenue collection as far as the Federal Board of Revenue is concerned, because as per the Pakistan Economic Survey that was released yesterday, there has been total tax collection with a 29.3% increase already. So do you think, considering the track record also the efforts put in already by the authorities. Setting a 38% increase for this fiscal year is not a big deal, and it's easily achievable.
I don't know about easily achievable, because one absolutely factual story that I shared on this program a little while ago was the FBR tried to tax a very significant agriculturalist, and 20 members of National Assembly, MNAs ranging from all different political parties and being led by a political party which is not in power right now, came to his office and said, don't tax this individual, don't tax agriculture. So if the government, and it is led by some very effective people, and you talked a little bit about ongoing projects, I know that Professor Ehsan Iqbal started some really important projects during his time about 10 years ago. That was then shelved. And if only those projects that he started 10 years ago, even if those are completed and these people are taxed properly, you know, the country would be in a different place in a small amount of time.
Mr. Shikoh Atif happened to be an economist joining us for this special transmission regarding the federal budget of the next fiscal year. Thank you very much for taking time out for views on news tonight. Dr. Khalid Waleed, when we talk about the 38% target that has been set as far as the FBR tax collection is concerned, 12,970 billion rupees, keeping the track record in view, 29.3% increase already, according to the Pakistan Economic Survey. So is it going to be easily achievable? It doesn't seem to be a big deal, keeping the track record in sight.
You are right that track record, it supports this ambitious sort of target, but still we need to have this structural sort of reforms in FBR in terms of tax administration, in terms of tax policy. Some of them were mentioned by the finance minister. Again, the diversification or broadening the tax base, undocumented economy should be documented. Significant portion of Pakistan's economy is still informal economy. We need to sort of make it formal. Third is that they want to make tax regime as much as possible as the progressive tax regime, so that more and more income you have, the more tax you pay. And again, fourth one, that the distinction between non-filers and filers, they sort of made it more obvious and putting some harsher penalties on it. Lastly, that they want to sort of decrease the incidence of tax on low income groups. So with that, broadening the tax base, that would sort of help Pakistan's economy, Pakistan's ambitious tax revenue. But again, I would say that the tax administration, it should be more focused on tax collection through digitalization, whereas the tax policy, that should be more focused on how to use this tax revenue, this tax policy to generate more and more economic growth, so that there is industrial growth, there is services sector growth, and more tax revenue is collected with that.
Now, creating a difference between a filer and a non-filer, bringing in the penalties for being a non-filer. Could you give your detailed analysis as to what sort of an impact it is going to have as far as the overall revenue collection is going to be concerned?
Well, it is going to work as a carrot and stick approach. Carrot for the filers, that non-filers are being punished, they are being penalized, and in terms of stick approach, the non-filers will see that there is more and more incidence of tax, so that they would sort of want to get themselves tax filers. So this is a carrot and stick approach and will have multiple consequences. Secondly,
please go ahead. Finish your thought.
Secondly, it will also help documenting the economy as well. More and more, particularly from the retailer sector, they would sort of make these formal arrangements. What the government should do and can do is make this process more simpler. Maybe if I want to be a filer, I would not want it to be wanting to hire a lawyer. So make it simple as possible, that one layman can sort of fill this form and become filer. So in that way, maybe we can broaden the tax base and bring more and more citizens to the tax net. So this is all about digitalization, easement, and sort of making it making the distinction between filers and non-filers more visible, so that more and more people join
documenting the economy and bringing all those areas into the tax base. Digitization, there has once again been mentioned by the finance minister. How crucial that is going to be, how important a role it's going to play?
If you see the budget or the budget speech, about 1 billion rupees have been allocated for digitalization of FBR.
Exactly.
So, which means that government is serious and they want to take it further. So, we need to jump on this train. We need to sort of classify our tax regime into tax administration as a separate unit and tax policy as a separate unit, and tax administration that is wholly focused on how to collect more and more revenues, how to control these tax leakages, and secondly the tax policy that is more of a legislature's job or policy makers job, where they make it more in such a way that complement economic growth, not sort of derail the economic growth. In economics, we have this Laffer curve where tax rate increases, tax revenue increases in the first phase, but there is limit. When the tax rate crosses that limit, the tax revenue starts to decrease, because the industrial units, they sort of shut down, and people do not want to pay taxes. So we need to sort of find that sweet spot and balance between tax rate and tax net.
Right, let me bring another participant, Dr. Shimail Daud, former president of the Rawalpindi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joining us on Skype. Dr. Daud, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. What were your expectations from this budget for the next fiscal year, and what are the key features do you think is going to help the business community in particular?
Thank you so much. From the top of, I think the theme was about how the focus of the government is to create a market economy, how to discourage people who are outside the tax ambit, and how to make sure that our revenues are increased, how to make sure that our exports are increased, at the same time how to support agri and other segments. Obviously, if we really look at it, the main focus, other than these highlights, still is on the old approach, where you have outlined the non-taxpayers, as you were discussing, as non-filers, which basically means that they will continuously have their separate line, and they will continuously thrive in that segment because they are a big part of the economy. So I think that the real, you can say, way forward is, and for us to see, is how this is going to be implemented, how we're going to bring the retail sector from the services, how we're going to bring the real estate and agri sectors to pay taxes towards the exchequer in terms of their size, and overall increase the collections for the government, and decrease their dependence or domestic and international or outside debt borrowing that the government has to rely on. So I think that is kind of the main theme.
So in the outgoing fiscal year, as per the Pakistan Economic Survey, Dr. Daud, the GDP growth had been 2.38%. Now this has been estimated to be at 3.6%. Your take regarding that?
Well, definitely it's a better target to achieve. Inflation has come down. We have achieved macroeconomic stability. But how are we going to derive the 3.6% growth? I mean, we can say that the above 2% growth that we had in the previous fiscal year, which we're about to close, primarily agri really took the lead on that. The industry and services did not perform as well, but we are hoping that the performance will enhance and improve. However, from the looks of it, from the budget speech, it is understood that the government has laid down in the PSDP a big figure, which has jumped above 50%. So that means the government wants to spend, and with the infrastructure development projects that are going to be in the federation and the provinces, I think that is going to play a major role in terms of propelling the economy and towards the 3.6% growth. Uh, Maybe this is not the best approach. It is an old tested approach, but it is an expensive approach. And I think that the reliance on private sector, although is mentioned in the budget speech and is one of the strategies, but the reliance on it is still very, very low as compared to the complete outlay.
Okay, so creating a bigger difference as far as who happens to be a filer and who doesn't have, who happens to be a non-filer, bringing in the penalties. How bigger an impact as far as the overall revenue collection with those penalties from non-filers is concerned?
Well, obviously, in terms of capital gains in the real estate, in the stock market, we see that there is a huge difference in terms of the purchases in the past as well. But people got away with it, and this regime of filers and non-filers has been there for some time. But we have not really seen people graduating or increasing our tax to GDP ratio, or people flying into large, hordes in getting becoming filers. So that means that there is more incentive for them to stay outside the documented economy. So this is the real test that maybe this carrot and stick, as was mentioned before, maybe the stick isn't working. I think maybe more work needs to be done, and pressure needs to be exerted where it should become impossible for somebody to function outside the documented economy.
So what could those measures be in order to put on more pressure?
For example, one
Please go
example is that, yeah, so one example is, as was discussed by many other participants throughout the day and so forth, is that we have industrial electric connections. It was also mentioned by the previous FBR chairman that why not discourage or disconnect anyone who does not who is doing a commercial activity but is not a filer, is not registered with the tax authority, and is already doing a commercial activity or an industrial activity. How is that possible? So that is just one measure. I know that the government has already taken some measures like disconnection of SIMs, perhaps making it difficult for them or increasing their taxation. So these are all measures, but I think also having one-to-one discussions and ensuring that these people are brought to the taxation, and that means not only relying on the data and doing the carrot, but also talking to them, convincing them, and encouraging them. I think the private sector, the chambers of commerce and associations and other influencing bodies can take also a leading role in this and work hand in hand with the RTOs and regulatory authorities to really bring forth and ensure that people are encouraged and made to understood why they need to participate in their national responsibility.
Okay, so let's talk about the agriculture sector, the kind of growth it has posted during the outgoing fiscal year, 6.25%, the highest in the last 19 years. Firstly, how do you look at this particular performance in this particular sector as compared to the performance in others, industries and services? How do you compare those, and what's exactly required in order to improve the performance as far as the industries and services to bring it at par with the agriculture sector is concerned for the current fiscal year or the incoming fiscal year is concerned?
I personally don't think that there is a correlation between the activities that were really taken by the government and this performance, because there is a cyclical fashion, growth. There are so many factors which there is no control over. So I think more needs to be understood how we have achieved this high growth. What needs to be done in future needs to be a complete follow-up, understanding how we can really, because in the past, all we remember is the strategy of giving subsidy in terms of inputs or all the other maybe subsidies to the tube wells, etc., or seeds. But Other than this, technological advancements, support mechanisms, storage facilities, supply chain. I mean, there's so many other segments where those support mechanisms did not exist, and there is no really, monitoring and evaluation. So we really need to understand that was this merely a chance, or was there actually some direct correlation? And I really think that that understanding is not to that depth.
Dr. Shimail Daud, former president of the Rawalpindi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for taking time out. And in the studio, we were joined by Dr. Khalid, waleed, economist associated with STPI. Dr. Waleed, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on this special budget show. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.